the morning Maya Calloway's life fell apart started like every other Tuesday. Coffee, silence, the soft, familiar hum of a house that had always felt slightly too quiet. She remembers standing at the kitchen counter in bare feet, watching the steam curl off her mug, and thinking, for just 1 second, that she was content, that things were fine, that the vague unease she'd been carrying in her chest for the past 6 months was just anxiety, just her mind doing what her mind always did. She was wrong, because 40 minutes later, she was sitting in her husband's car, looking for a parking meter receipt, completely mundane, completely ordinary, and she found it. A phone, tucked beneath the driver's seat. Black case, screen cracked on one corner. The kind of detail that seemed small, almost forgettable, except her husband Daniel's phone was currently upstairs on his charger, where it always was. So whose phone was this? Maya picked it up. It was locked, but the screen lit up with a notification. And those 4 words she read in that fraction of a second would echo in her head for the next 2 years of her life. Miss you already, baby. She sat in that car for 11 minutes without moving. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. She just sat there in the driveway of the home she'd shared with Daniel for 7 years, holding a phone that wasn't supposed to exist, and something inside her quietly, permanently, shifted, because Maya Calloway was not the kind of woman who panicked. She was the kind of woman who investigated, and what she was about to uncover wasn't just an affair. It was something far worse. To understand what happens next, you need to understand who Maya was before this moment. She was 34 years old, a mid-level project manager at a logistics firm called Harver & Cross, based in Columbus, Ohio. Not a glamorous job, she'd be the first to tell you that. She spent her days coordinating freight timelines and mediating between department heads who refused to talk to each other directly. She was good at it, quietly, almost frustratingly competent. The kind of person other people leaned on without quite realizing they were doing it. She'd grown up in a small town in eastern Tennessee, a place where everyone knew your name and your business and your grandmother's business. And that kind of upbringing had given Maya 2 equally powerful traits, a fierce sense of loyalty and an equally fierce instinct to appear unbothered. She didn't air her problems. She solved them, or she buried them, sometimes both. Her friends described her as the calm one, the one you called when something went wrong because she wouldn't spiral. She'd make a list. She had a dry, quiet humor that caught people off guard. She liked true crime podcasts and terrible reality TV and long drives with no particular destination. She was the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday without prompting, and who would stay late at work to help a colleague she barely liked because the job needed doing and she was there. She was, in almost every measurable way, a good person trying to live a decent life. And she was deeply, privately lonely. She wouldn't have admitted that to you, not then, not easily, but it was true. It had been true for longer than she cared to examine. Her marriage to Daniel had started as something genuine. She believed that. She needed you to understand that, because everything that follows only makes sense if you understand that she had loved him once, completely and without reservation. They'd met 9 years ago at a work conference. He was charming in that low-key, effortless way that didn't register as performance at the time. Dark hair, glasses, a laugh that made you feel like you'd said something genuinely clever. He was in financial consulting, or at least that's what he told her. He traveled a lot for work. He had a way of making absence feel romantic rather than suspicious, sending long text messages at midnight from hotel rooms in cities she'd never been to, voice notes at 6 a.m. that started with, "I was just thinking about you." They got married after 2 years. It was a small wedding. Nice, but small. Daniel had mentioned early on that he didn't have much family. Parents both gone, no siblings, a handful of acquaintances from work. At the time, Maya had found that poignant. Something to protect, something to grow into. They settled into a routine that most married couples would recognize. Comfortable, predictable. A 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. 2 cars, a shared streaming account. Arguments about whose turn it was to call the plumber. Vacations every other year if the budget allowed. But somewhere around year 4, and something had started to thin, not dramatically, not with shouting or broken dishes. It was more like a slow withdrawal, Daniel working later, traveling more, the long texts replaced by brief check-ins. Maya had chalked it up to stress, to the invisible drift that happened to every long marriage she'd ever observed. She'd told herself they were fine. She'd told herself that so many times she'd almost stopped noticing she was telling herself anything at all. She'd almost asked him once. 3 months before the day she found the phone. They'd been sitting on the couch after dinner, some forgettable show playing in the background, and she'd looked at his profile, the familiar slope of his nose, the way he held his jaw, and she'd felt it so clearly. The distance, the glass wall. She'd opened her mouth. He'd looked over and smiled, that easy, automatic smile, and said, "You good?" And she'd said, "Yeah, I'm good." She wasn't good, but that morning, sitting in his car with a stranger's phone burning in her hand, Maya Calloway stopped pretending she was. She put the phone back exactly where she found it. That detail matters because it tells you something about how Maya operated. Another person might have confronted Daniel immediately, might have thrown the phone across the kitchen table, demanded answers, let the anger lead. Maya did something more calculated. She put it back, went inside, finished her coffee, and went to work as if nothing had happened. She needed to think. At her desk that day, she did something she would later describe as the beginning of the unraveling. She Googled Daniel Calloway. And now, you might think, of course she'd Googled her own husband. Most people do, early in a relationship. A light search, a few social media profiles, maybe a mutual connection on LinkedIn. Maya had done that years ago, but this was different. This was the systematic, methodical deep dive of a woman who suddenly realized she had accepted, without question, a version of a person that she had never actually verified. The first thing she noticed wasn't alarming. It was just thin. Daniel had a LinkedIn profile, senior financial consultant at a firm called Meridian Advisory Group. His job history showed 12 years in financial consulting. His education listed Marquette University, class of 2009. A few recommendations from colleagues, blandly professional. His profile picture was 2 years out of date. Maya searched Meridian Advisory Group. The website existed. Clean, professional looking, the kind of corporate site that could have been built with a template in an afternoon. A Columbus address, a phone number, a small list of staff, Daniel among them. She called the number from her work phone, on her lunch break, in her car. It rang 4 times. A recording picked up. "You've reached Meridian Advisory Group. Our offices are currently closed. Please leave a message or visit our website." Maya left no message. She sat with that for a moment. A business that went to voicemail in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon. It could mean anything. Small companies did that. People worked remotely. There were 100 boring explanations. She told herself that. Then she searched the Columbus address listed on the website, 1145 Westmore Drive, on Google Maps. The street view loaded. It was a UPS store. Maya stared at her phone screen for a long moment. A company address that was a mailbox rental center. She typed it into her notes app, said nothing to no one. She went back to work. But that evening, when Daniel came home, on time actually, which felt almost ironic, she watched him differently, the way he moved through the kitchen. The easy way he kissed her cheek and asked about her day. She watched his hands while he made dinner, noticing for the first time that he never checked his phone in front of her. He used to. She couldn't pinpoint when that had stopped. "Good day?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "Busy." She smiled at him, warm, ordinary. And underneath the smile, trust the gears were already turning, because Maya had one more thing she'd found that afternoon, buried in a page 4 search result she almost hadn't clicked. A forum thread, an obscure financial advice forum, the kind with usernames and no real accountability. 3 years old. A post from a user called Teeth Holloway _OSU complaining about a consulting scam, describing a man who had been paid for services never rendered, a company called Meridian Advisory Group, and a contact named, and this part had made Maya's stomach drop quietly, like a stone into still water, Daniel C. The original post had 17 replies, and then, abruptly, the thread had been deleted. All of it, except Google had cached a fragment. Just enough for Maya to read 3 words that had stopped her cold. "That's not his real name." For the next week, Maya did not change her behavior in any way that Daniel could have noticed. She still cooked dinner on her nights. She still watched TV with him on the couch. She still said "drive safe" when he left in the morning and "how was it" when he returned. She maintained the surface of their life with the precision of someone laying tiles over a cracked foundation, careful, deliberate, giving nothing away. Meanwhile, she built a file. It started in a notes app on her personal phone, the one Daniel had never shown any interest in. Within 3 days, it had migrated to a burner email account, and then to a Google Drive folder she accessed only from her work computer during lunch breaks, or from a private browsing window she'd learned to open and close like clockwork. Let me walk you through what she found. Not because each discovery is a door into a darker room. The first door was the money. Maya had always had her own bank account, something her mother had drilled into her before she was old enough to need it. A woman always keeps her own money. Their finances were mostly separate, with a joint account for household bills that they both contributed to equally. Maya had considered this healthy, responsible. What she hadn't paid close attention to in years was the balance in that joint account. She looked at it now, really looked at it. 18 months of statements. The contributions from Daniel's side had been irregular for the last 14 months. Not absent, enough to avoid raising alarm, but erratic. Sometimes double the usual amount, sometimes almost nothing. Back with a pattern that made no consistent sense for someone with a salaried consulting income. She pulled their tax returns. They'd filed jointly for 6 years. She'd always signed where Daniel pointed and trusted that he'd handled the details, because he was the finance professional in the house. She read them now, line by line. His reported income had been $94,000 annually for 3 consecutive years. She pulled the salary range for senior financial consultants in Columbus, Ohio. The median was $112,000. The floor was $78,000. $94,000 was possible, plausible, unremarkable, except she couldn't find a single W-2 for Meridian Advisory Group. What she found instead, buried in the 2021 return, was a Schedule C, a self-employment form, which meant Daniel wasn't an employee of Meridian. He was reporting as an independent contractor, his own business, billing a company that operated out of a UPS store mailbox. He was, for tax purposes, billing himself. The second door was the name. Maya had tried to verify his educational background. Marquette University, class of 2009. She'd submitted a request through their alumni verification portal, a long shot she knew, and then separately searched the Wisconsin Department of Motor Vehicles Public Records System for a Daniel Calloway, date of birth March 3, 1984, which was what his driver's license read. No results. She searched Ohio. She found him there, but only from 2013 onward. Before 2013, There was no digital footprint for a Daniel Calloway, matching his description in any state that she could locate. He had appeared, fully formed, at age 29. The cached forum fragment played in her mind again. That's not his real name. She needed to know what his real name was. That's when she made a decision that she would later describe as the most terrifying and most clarifying thing she had ever done. She took a week of vacation from work. She told Daniel she was visiting her college roommate in Atlanta. She drove 40 minutes to a private investigation firm she'd found through a Reddit recommendation thread for people navigating exactly this kind of situation. The investigator's name was Terrence Webb, former Columbus PD 50s, a man who had heard enough to be impossible to shock. He listened to Maya for 40 minutes without interrupting, and when she finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "You want the truth?" he said. "Not the comfortable version. The truth." "Always," Maya said. He nodded slowly. "Give me 10 days. She drove home through a sunset that was beautiful in a way that felt almost insulting, given the circumstances. All orange and gold over the freeway, the kind of sky that usually made her feel something. She felt nothing. She was completely, efficiently numb. But here's the thing about numbness. It's never the end of the story. It's the pause before the feeling gets loud enough that it can't be ignored. And what Terrence Webb was going to find in those 10 days would make the numbness impossible. 8 days in, Terrence Webb called her. Not a text, a call. The kind investigators make when the information is too heavy for a message. "Are you somewhere private?" he asked. She was in the Harver and Cross parking garage. "Engine running." "Yes." "Okay." A pause. She could hear him turning pages. "I'm going to read you some things, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Can you do that?" "Yes." "The man you know as Daniel Calloway, birth name Daniel Aaron Calloway, according to your marriage certificate and his Ohio DL, does not have a birth record under that name in any U.S. state. The SSN attached to that identity was originally issued in Kentucky in 1984, but not to a Daniel Calloway. The person it was issued to died at age 3. Maya said nothing. This is a practice sometimes called ghosting or identity layering, taking the social security number of a deceased individual and building a new identity around it. It's not common, but it's not rare either. He went on. The man you married is based on fingerprint cross-referencing through a third-party database. Almost certainly a man named Marcus David Holt. Born 1983 in Lexington, Kentucky. He has a prior arrest in 2009 for wire fraud. The case was pleaded down to a misdemeanor. He did 90 days and 2 years probation. In 2011, Marcus Holt dropped off the grid in Kentucky. No recorded address, no employment, no tax returns. In 2013, Daniel Calloway appears in Columbus. Still, Maya said nothing. "There's more," Terrence said, and his voice dropped just slightly. The shift of a man about to say the hardest part. "I need you to hear this carefully." "Tell me," she said. "He has a second residence, an apartment in Westerville. That's about 20 miles from your house. He's been paying the lease in cash through a third party for at least 3 years. I have his car on camera arriving there on 11 separate occasions in the last month alone." "Is there someone else there?" Maya asked. "Yes, a woman. Late 20s, early 30s. Her name is Priya Anand. She moved in approximately 14 months ago." "Okay," Maya said. "Maya? What?" "There's a child, a little girl, maybe 18 months old, maybe 2 years. I couldn't confirm the age." The parking garage hummed around her. Someone walked past her car without looking at her, phone to their ear, oblivious. The world continuing on, completely indifferent. "Does she know about me?" Maya asked. "I don't know," Terrence said honestly. "I don't know what he's told her." "What's his name to her?" A pause. I haven't been able to confirm, but from what I've observed, she calls him David. David, not Daniel, not Marcus. To David. A third name, a third life. One more thing, Terrence said. And I want to say up front, this is preliminary, and you should take this to a lawyer before you do anything with it, but I found patterns in his financial activity consistent with client misappropriation. He's been receiving funds from at least 4 individuals who I believe to be investment clients. The amounts are significant. We're talking, in aggregate, close to $800,000 over 3 years. Maya exhaled slowly through her nose. He's been running a fraud operation, she said. Not a question. It looks that way, and here's the thing. Maya, when guys like this get cornered, they don't stay and fight. They run. They have a bag packed. They have an exit. How long do I have? I don't know, but you should move quickly, quietly. And you absolutely cannot let him know what you know. He won't know, Maya said. She ended the call. She sat in that parking garage for 22 minutes. She did not cry. She made a list. Here is where the story becomes something Maya herself didn't entirely expect. Because here's what she'd anticipated. Rage, a clean, pure, righteous anger directed squarely at her husband, at Daniel, at Marcus, at David, at whoever this man actually was. She'd anticipated it would feel like war, two-sided, clearly defined. What she hadn't anticipated was Priya. Let me tell you about Priya Anand. Maya hadn't been looking for her. Not really. Her lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Carla Simmons, who took the case after one meeting and said, "We're going to hurt him where it counts." The money had advised her explicitly, "Do not contact the other woman. Not yet. Not until the legal strategy was locked in. Too many variables. Too much risk of tipping Daniel off." Maya understood the logic. She didn't follow the advice. On a Saturday, while Daniel was supposedly at a client dinner, which Maya now knew meant Westerville, she drove out there. She didn't have a plan. She just drove. She sat outside the apartment complex for 45 minutes. A modest place. A second-floor unit with a light on. She could see the glow through curtains she recognized. Warm yellow, the kind you'd pick for a child's room. She was about to leave, and then Priya came out, just to the parking lot, to retrieve something from her car. Young. 28, as Maya would later confirm. Pretty in a quiet way, wearing a worn sweatshirt and carrying a grocery bag, with a toddler on her hip who was playing with a set of keys. The little girl had Daniel's jawline. Maya sat very still. Priya didn't look up. She didn't see the woman watching her from a parked Honda 30 feet away. She got what she needed from her car, kissed the top of her daughter's head, and went back inside. The light stayed on. Maya drove home. And somewhere on that drive, on a dark stretch of highway with no streetlights and the radio turned off, she started to cry. Not for herself, not exactly, or at least, not only for herself. She cried for Priya, who didn't know, for the little girl with Daniel's jaw, who was completely innocent. For the version of herself who had stood at an altar 8 years ago, believing everything was real. She cried for all 3 of them. And then she stopped. She wiped her face. She drove the rest of the way home in silence, and she began to understand something that would shape everything she did next. This wasn't just her story to reclaim. It was Priya's too. But before she could do anything about that, before she could figure out how to reach her, whether to warn her, what she even owed this stranger who was also, in the most terrible way, her peer in suffering, something happened that forced Maya's entire timeline forward by weeks. Daniel found the burner email, not the folder, not the file, just a tab she'd accidentally left open on the home laptop. A browser window she'd been certain she'd closed but hadn't, and Daniel had sat down to check something late on a Thursday night, and he'd seen it. He didn't say anything. And Maya was in the bedroom when she heard the laptop close. She heard him sit very still for a moment. Then she heard him get up, refill his glass of water, and come to bed. He kissed her goodnight. She lay there in the dark, heart going at twice its normal speed, acutely aware that two people in a bed can be completely silent and thinking entirely different things. She texted Terrence under the covers. "I think he knows." Terrence responded within minutes. "How long until you're ready to move?" Maya thought about the file, the lawyer, the account she'd quietly opened 6 weeks ago, in her name only, where she'd been steadily, carefully moving money. She thought about what Terrence had told her. When guys like this get cornered, they run. And she thought about the little girl in Westerville playing with a set of keys. She typed back, 48 hours. What Maya did in those 48 hours was the kind of thing that would have seemed impossible to the woman she was before this. In the first 12 hours, she met with Carla Simmons. Not in Carla's downtown office. That would have been too risky, too visible. They met at a coffee shop in a suburb neither of them normally frequented, and Maya slid a folder across the table with everything she'd compiled. Terrence's report, the bank statements, the tax returns, the cached forum fragment, the results of the SSN verification Terrence had sourced through a licensed skip trace service. Carla went through it page by page. When she looked up, she was quiet for a moment. "You built this entire file in 6 weeks," she said. "Closer to 7, Maya said. Carla smiled grimly. "He has no idea what's coming." They finalized the legal action. A divorce filing, yes, but bundled with a report to the Franklin County Financial Crimes Unit that Carla had already made informal contact with, because $800,000 missing from private investors is not a civil matter. That is a federal one. In the second 12 hours, day 2, morning, Maya did the thing that no one, not Terrence, not Carla, had specifically told her to do. She called Priya. She'd found the number through a method she'd rather not fully describe, but it involved persistence and a women's Facebook group in Westerville, where Priya had once asked for pediatrician recommendations. Maya had messaged her there once, warmly, as if she were a neighbor. Priya had responded with her phone number without suspicion. That detail, in retrospect, told Maya everything about the kind of person Priya was. Trusting, open, the kind of person who answers strangers' messages because she defaults to assuming good intentions. Just like Maya had once. The call lasted 43 minutes. The first 3 of those minutes were the worst. The stumbling explanation, the "I don't know how to tell you this," the sound of Priya going very quiet on the other end of the line. The kind of quiet that's actually screaming. But then something shifted. Because here's what Maya hadn't expected. Priya had her own doubts. She'd been living with a man named David Reeves. That was his name to her, David Reeves, for 2 years. They'd been together for 3. He traveled constantly. He had no family he spoke about. He paid for things in cash with a regularity she'd eventually stopped questioning, because questioning it produced deflection that somehow always ended in her feeling guilty for asking. She'd been telling herself for months that something was wrong, but she didn't know what. She'd found a receipt once. Columbus. He'd told her it was for a work meeting. She'd believed him, she'd needed to believe him, because she had a 15-month-old daughter and a half-finished accounting degree and a life she'd built around someone she was only now beginning to understand she didn't actually know. By the time Maya finished telling her everything she knew, Daniel, Marcus, the investors, the identity, Priya had gone from silence to a very calm, very flat voice that Maya recognized because she'd used it herself. "What are we going to do?" Priya asked. "Not what are you going to do? We." "I have a lawyer," Maya said. "She's very good. I think you need one too." "I'll find one today," Priya said. "There's one more thing." "Tell me." "He might run. Terrence, my investigator. He thinks if Daniel suspects he's been found out, he disappears. So if he contacts you in the next few days acting normal, or if he suddenly wants to leave town for a trip, you need to call me immediately." A pause. "His name isn't David, is it?" "No," Maya said gently. "It's probably Marcus, but I'm not sure even that's his full truth." Another pause. "I'm going to get a DNA test," Priya said quietly. "For my daughter. I need to know what she's—" She stopped. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "I know," Maya said. "Just I know." And here, in this moment between two women who had never met, and yet were standing in the same wreckage, there was something that could only be described as the strangest, most unexpected solidarity, because they'd both been fooled by the same man. But they weren't going to be defeated by him. He came home that Friday evening. Maya had set the table. There was dinner. Simple, the kind they'd had 100 times, the kind that looked completely normal. Daniel sat down. He was dressed well, as he always was. Hair slightly damp from what she now assumed was not a gym session. He picked up his fork. "How was your day?" he asked. And Maya looked at him across the table. This man whose face she had memorized, whose habits she knew better than her own in some ways. At this man who had called himself Daniel and Marcus and David and possibly others she'd never know, and she felt nothing she'd expected to feel. No rage, no grief, not yet. Just an extraordinary, crystalline clarity. "Actually," she said, "I wanted to talk to you about something." He looked up. "I've spoken to my lawyer. Her name is Carla Simmons. She'll be reaching out to you on Monday through legal channels, but I thought it was fair to tell you in person first." She kept her voice level, almost conversational. "I've also spoken with the Franklin County Financial Crimes Unit. They have a contact at the FBI field office, which is apparently relevant given the interstate nature of some of what you've been doing." Daniel had gone very still. "I know about Marcus Holt," she said. "I know about the SSN. I know about Meridian. I know about the investors and the money. And I know about Westerville." Not a flicker. That's what she'd remember later. Not a flicker. No protest. No false confusion. No, "What are you talking about?" Just a man behind a mask, watching the mask being removed. "Priya knows," Maya said. "She has her own lawyer." Something moved across his face then. The first real thing she'd seen in years. She thought, in the strange analytical space she was operating in, that it might have been grief. But she couldn't be sure if he was grieving the situation or the loss of control over it. "Maya," he started. "Don't," she said, not unkindly, just firmly. "There's nothing you can say right now that's true enough to be useful. You should call a lawyer tonight. I genuinely recommend it." She stood up. "I'm going to my sister's. I'll be back Sunday for my things. If you're not here when I arrive, that's fine. If you run—" And here she paused, deliberately. "They'll find you. I've made sure of that." She picked up her bag, her keys, her coffee from the counter. She walked to the door. "Maya?" She stopped but didn't turn around. "How long?" he asked. "How long did you know?" She thought about it. "Long enough," she said, and she walked out. He didn't run. That surprised Terrence. It surprised Carla. It may have surprised Maya, though she never said so directly. He stayed. He retained a lawyer, a good one actually, and over the following months, the full scope of what Marcus David Holt had built and done and hidden began to surface in the specific, merciless way that things surface when federal investigators get involved. His real name was confirmed as Marcus Holt. The Marquette degree was fabricated. The identity had been constructed over 2 years, following his 2011 disappearance from Kentucky. He'd built it carefully. A document here, a business there, a paper trail thin enough to look legitimate and thick enough to avoid casual scrutiny. He'd been doing it long enough that he'd almost forgotten, Maya suspected, which version of himself was real. The investors. 4 of them, ages ranging from late 30s to early 60s, people who had trusted him with retirement savings, college funds, inheritance money, began to come forward once the investigation became public. The total misappropriated was confirmed at just over $1.1 million over 4 years. He pleaded guilty. And the sentencing was 18 months down the road from the day Maya walked out that door. And the result of that, the specifics of what he received, is a matter of public record for those who know where to look. But I want to spend these last few minutes on something other than the legal outcome. Because the legal outcome, while significant and necessary, is not the heart of this story. The heart of this story is what happened to Maya and to Priya. They met in person for the first time 6 weeks after the phone call. A coffee shop, neutral territory, somewhere neither of them had been with him. It was slightly awkward for the first 10 minutes in a way that is completely understandable. 2 women sitting down to acknowledge the shape of the life they'd been unknowingly sharing. And then Priya ordered a ridiculously oversized pastry and offered Maya half of it without asking. And Maya laughed. Actually laughed, a real one, the first in longer than she could calculate. And something unlocked. They became, improbably and genuinely, friends. Not because it was tidy, not because the movies would have written it that way, but because they were the only 2 people in the world who fully understood what the other had experienced, and that particular kind of understanding has a gravity to it that defies most conventional social logic. Priya finished her accounting degree. Her daughter, whose name is Isla, and who is by all accounts extremely opinionated about the color of her sippy cups, turned 2 the following spring. Maya sold the house, got something smaller, hers alone. Ma with a backyard she'd been slowly making her own. She took a promotion she'd been quietly offered and had put off for 2 years because Daniel had made subtle, consistent comments about the hours it would require. She started running again, something she'd loved in her 20s and abandoned without quite noticing. She is not entirely healed. She would tell you that plainly, without drama. Trust doesn't rebuild the way it was before. It rebuilds differently, more deliberately, with a structural awareness that wasn't there the first time. She's more careful now, more honest with herself about when something feels wrong, instead of explaining it away. She told her story to one person she barely knew, a woman at her office who was quietly, obviously going through something and didn't know where to start. Maya took her to coffee. Trick told her some of it, not all of it. The biggest mistake I made, Maya told her, wasn't being fooled. Smart people get fooled. That's what manipulation is designed to do. The mistake was all the times I noticed something and told myself it was nothing. That's where I gave it power. Not in the beginning, in the middle, all those little moments in the middle where I chose the comfortable lie over the uncomfortable question. The woman at the coffee shop nodded. Maya stirred her drink. Ask the question, she said. Even when it scares you, especially when it scares you. There's a version of Maya Calloway's story that gets told as a crime story. Identity fraud, financial manipulation, a faceless villain at the center of a carefully constructed web. And it is that, but it's also something more personal. Something most of us can recognize in some form, even if the stakes in our own lives are smaller. Most of us have had a version of that moment on the couch. That moment when we looked at someone, a partner, a friend, a colleague, a parent, and felt the distance, the glass wall, the thing we couldn't name but absolutely knew was there. And made the choice to look away, because looking meant knowing. And knowing meant the conversation, and the conversation meant the change. And change, even necessary change, is terrifying in a way that comfort, even false comfort, can temporarily outrun. Maya's story is extreme. Most of us will never discover our spouse has a constructed identity and a shadow family, but the core of it, the practiced art of not asking the question. That part is deeply, painfully human. And there's something else worth sitting with. Priya, the woman who, by any surface measure, should have been an adversary in this story, was, in fact, its most unexpected grace note. Because Maya could have made this entirely about her own injury, her own recovery, her own justice, she would have been entitled to do exactly that. But she called. She called a stranger who was about to have her world disassembled, because Maya knew what it felt like to not know. And she decided that sparing someone else, even a day of that unknowing, was worth the discomfort of a terrifying phone call. That decision, not the file, not the investigation, not the confrontation, that was the bravest thing Maya Calloway did. And maybe that's what's worth keeping from this story. Not the legal outcome, not even the resolution. And the idea that when we survive something, we get a choice about what we do with the knowledge of how it felt. We can hoard it, keep it private, use it only for our own protection. Or we can use it to reach toward someone who's standing exactly where we were standing. Who needs, more than anything, to know they are not alone? Maya still has the parking meter receipt she was originally looking for, by the way. The one she never found that morning because she found the phone instead. She found it later, cleaning out the joint bank account paperwork. It had fallen behind the seat. She kept it. She's not entirely sure why. Maybe because it's the ordinary object that sits at the edge of an extraordinary story. A reminder that the biggest turning points in our lives almost never announce themselves. They're just a Tuesday morning. Follow a simple errand, a reach beneath a seat. And then everything is different. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment where you noticed something was wrong? In a relationship, a friendship, a job, and chose to look the other way? What finally made you look back? Or maybe you're sitting with something right now that you haven't been willing to ask the question about yet. The comments are a safe place. You don't have to use your real name. You just have to be honest, which, as this story shows, is one of the hardest and most necessary things a person can do. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories like Maya's, stories about ordinary people navigating extraordinary deception, well, about the quiet courage it takes to rebuild a life you thought you understood, subscribe and stay close. Because there's always another story to tell. And the next one is already waiting.